The support of the USA for Israel has been unparalleled in human history, not just financially, but politically and emotionally. The USA and Britain, 100 years ago, shared the same steeping in biblical law and enthusiasm for the historic land of Israel. I heard the current Lord Balfour say just a week or two ago that it was because he went to chapel at his school, private school you would call it, public school we call it, where they had Bible readings every day and twice on Sunday, that he became so familiar with the place names that to us are familiar in Israel. In step with the British adoption of the Balfour Declaration, some charismatic American Jews, most notably Justice Brandeis, on whom I wrote a thesis at Brandeis University where I did my master's, and Rabbi Wise had a profound effect on President Wilson, as you know, and President Truman recognized the State of Israel immediately in 1948. But then and now, in the UK and here, there were successful and American and British Jews who feared that the establishment of a distinct Jewish state might threaten their own position and their own loyalty might be called into question. And you hear resonances of that today, with Jews who go out of their way to call themselves Jews for Justice in Palestine or something like that, because they are frightened that their position might be called into question. They want to hold their hands up and say, no, we're not like those other Jews, we are good Jews. And in fact, they're Jews only really one day a year when it comes to writing letters and signing declarations against Israel. They're not normally Jews when it comes to everyday communal involvement. There was also one vital difference between the US and the UK when it came to the independent Jewish future 100 years ago. The US in the early 20th century was so much more of a successful and attractive home for Jews than existed in Europe. European Jews even then sensed the shadows lying over them, with worse to come. And their embrace of Zionism was with a note of desperation, quite missing from the American welcome of the Declaration. As I said yesterday, I grew up in a very Zionist household, but I sort of forgot about the need to defend Israel after I left school anyway, until I entered the House of Lords 12 years ago. I went there with no particular mission to defend Jews, but when I got there, I realized that there was, to put it politely, an over-concern with Israel. Once a year I go to the House of Lords Research Department to ask how many questions and debates there have been in the previous 12 months about Israel, Gaza, Palestine, West Bank, and so on. For the last few years, it's been running at about 400 a year. And then I say, how many have there been about Syria, Yemen, Turkey, you name it? Guess the answer, a handful, that's all. Now, even though Israel is rooted in the rule of law, as has been said, an absurdly literal interpretation is applied to the Balfour Declaration by her enemies. In fact, it was clear at the time that the Jewish homeland was to run from the Mediterranean to the Jordan, and Jewish territory was gradually eroded as the years passed. Jordan was the new state designed for Arab self-determination. But if we're going to be literal about the Balfour Declaration, then let's be literal. It referred to the preservation of civil and religious rights for non-Jews. Note they were not called Palestinians, that came much later, in Palestine, and Jews in other countries. The Arabs who stayed in Israel in 1948 and their heirs are now 20% of the population. When surveyed, they say they would prefer to remain Israeli citizens rather than transfer as Palestinian citizens to the new state if it comes about. They form 17 members of the Knesset, judges, university professors and deans, and army officers with equal rights. But 800,000 Jews were driven out of Middle Eastern states in the late 1940s in the aftermath of the creation of Israel, in contravention of that final part of the Balfour Declaration, not to mention the millions killed across Europe. Most of the Middle Eastern Jewish refugees were resettled in Israel, where their descendants flourish today, unlike the deliberate abandonment of the Palestinian so-called refugees, rejected by the countries in which they are resident, denied civil rights there, and kept as supplicants and pawns by the United Nations Relief and Works Organization. The world has been entirely complacent about the use of Palestinians in their millions in other countries as pawns, awaiting a settlement which their leaders refused to reach. Before the establishment of Israel, there were hundreds of thousands of Jews in Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, Iraq, and Libya. Where are they now? They are all gone, bar a handful, cleansed and expelled in defiance of the Balfour Declaration. There is not a single Jew in Jordan, and there will not be allowed to be a single Jew in the future Palestine, according to its leaders. And apparently, I have read that when there is a Palestine, they will not automatically welcome back as citizens their refugees in other countries. They will continue to designate them as refugees. And the deeper meaning of that must be that only when they take Israel, as they wish to do, will there be an end to the refugee situation, a situation which is, of course, completely abhorrent to us. We know we regret the late establishment of Israel, if only it had come earlier. Churchill himself regretted the 1939 White Paper, which closed the doors to so many. My mother was a very sparky young thing in the 1930s. She sailed to Israel from Britain with her British passport on a ship going to the first Maccabean Games. And she told me, but I better not give you the details, that she played her part as a holder of a British passport in smuggling Jews into Israel in the 1930s who would not otherwise have been allowed in there. But there's much to celebrate. Israel's leadership in innovation, its 13 Nobel Prize winners, its invention of everything, from mobile phones to the original algorithm for emails, voicemail and the USB flash drive, desalination, the Intel processor chip. It spends an enormous amount on research and development. It has the second highest density in the world of startups. It is a world leader in much advanced science. The contribution made by Israel to the welfare of mankind in 70 years is out of all proportion to its size, and out of all proportion to the contribution made by other states to Israel and world Jewry. If Britain and the US want to promote a peaceful solution, then the soft power of science and innovation will do more for peace than bludgeoning the Israelis. We celebrate self-determination for the Jewish people, a concept born in the Balfour Declaration after thousands of years of dispersal and persecution. Israel has liberated Jews and given them pride, and shown what a small, persecuted people can do when given control over their own destiny in a tiny state. The Palestinians need a Gandhi, or a Mandela, or a Ben-Gurion, or a Weizmann, men prepared to take what is on offer, as we did, and make that offer blossom. So thank you, America, for nurturing modern Zionism until it gave birth to the new state. Mazel tov, America.